Welcome to the Prizefights podcast, where we keep tabs on the big bouts coming up, and a lot of good fights are coming up in the next few months, from Klitschko, Chisora, Maidana, Alexander, which we'll talk about in this podcast, to Sergio Martinez versus Matthew Macklin, Hopkins Dawson Part 2, and then eventually we get the really big ones, Mayweather Cotto in May, Pacquiao Bradley in June, and probably Berto Ortiz number 2 in June as well. But for now, let's talk about the fight that happens tomorrow, Saturday, in Munich, Germany, between Vitaly Klitschko and Derek Chisora. Remember, Chisora he's a British fighter. He was supposed to have fought Vitaly's brother Vladimir before Vladimir had a rib injury or a stomach injury and had to pull out and fought David Haye instead. And now Chisora gets the chance to fight the other Klitschko giant, and I don't think it's going to go well from him, as I'll talk about here in a minute. But I want to talk about this idea of Klitschko being boring. Many people say the Klitschko brothers are very boring to watch, and I've always responded by saying, well, if you like knockouts, they're the most exciting fighters to watch. If you look at their knockouts compared to their wins, how many of their wins are knockouts? It's insane. 88 to 90%. I think Vitaly's is higher than 90%. So 90% of the time, when you're watching a Klitschko fight, you're going to see a knockout. The response is usually it takes a while to get that knockout. You have to watch 8, 9, 10, 11 boring rounds before you see it. And I think that's okay, because boxing is the sweet science. It's not like MMA and UFC, where you don't have to delay that kind of gratification. You're supposed to appreciate the chess match and watch the fighters use their skills and their training to soften each other up before they try to get the guy out of there. So I love watching the Klitschko's fight, even if it takes 8, 9, 10 rounds for that knockout. I think that they're every bit as exciting as Lennox Lewis was, and he was another European fighter who stands erect and uses the jab, and may not be exciting like a Mike Tyson was, who was very explosive in the early rounds and usually got the guy out of there in 4. But boxing isn't always Mike Tyson-esque. It's typically a chess match, and that's why we watch it. I heard recently that Derek Chisora slapped Vitaly Klitschko during the press conference. I think it was before or after the weigh-in. I have not seen that video yet, but I'll try to hunt it down and provide the link for you. There's also a YouTube video that I did watch where somebody is asking Chisora what he wants to do to Vitaly Klitschko, and unfortunately he says, "I want to F him." So, nice job, Derek. One more reason to vote for Vitaly in this fight. I think that this fight will be not a whole lot different than Vladimir Klitschko versus David Haye. You've got a Klitschko giant versus a very strong, athletic, aggressive British fighter. But I think the exception will be that Chisora will not run as much as David Haye did, and thus that makes him more susceptible to the knockout. And let's just hope that Chisora's corner has the moral fortitude to stop this fight before it ends up in a 12-round brain beating like Shannon Briggs experienced from Klitschko. I think that Vitaly's jab is just too good. It's too good. Even though he keeps his left hand down at his waist, it's quick, he knows what he's doing, he's athletic, and he's got ring smarts. He's going to use that jab to keep the distance, and then eventually that thunderous right hand will land and eventually knock out Derek. He's just too patient, too smart. And I like the way he uses his forearms nicely to push opponents away and set up the range for that big right hand. Vitaly is probably the better boxer of the two Klitschkos. He's fun to watch. Makes you nervous sometimes with that left hand low, but the pro-Chisora argument is in fact that low left hand of Vitaly Klitschko, and that is something to look at. You don't want to keep your left hand low against a quick and powerful puncher. So I think the early rounds will be interesting, but eventually it will settle into a typical Klitschko fight where the other guy is confused and eventually gets pounded. I also think that, just as David Haye did, Derek Chisora will come out a lot more cautious than people, including himself, thinks he will. It's Vitaly Klitschko. And people, once they get in the ring with that, they're a lot more cautious. It's kind of like the Mayweather factor. People talk all kinds of smack against Mayweather, and as Floyd says, it's different when you get in there. It's different when you get in there and the bell rings. You see a once-in-a-lifetime fighter, and people freeze up, and they panic. Look at Shane Mosley. He did nothing outside of round 2. He just froze up and panicked. Floyd has that ability. You can talk smack against the great fighters like that, who win a lot of fights, if not all the fights, and once you get in the ring, it's different. You freeze up, you can't pull the trigger, you think too much, you end up getting smacked. Good luck, Derek Chisora. Let's also talk about Maidana Alexander. I have no show notes for this, so I'll just wing it. I'm a big Maidana fan. I think that he's the most powerful puncher in the 140 class. I thought that what he showed against Khan was very special, and that is he came back in the last 2 or 3 rounds to make that fight close and to almost put Khan down in the 11th round. I thought that he took a good beating, just got out-jabbed and out-boxed by a faster, more skilled opponent, but he has the fortitude and the heart to stay in there and to turn the tables at the end of the fight. And those kind of fighters are dangerous, guys who are aggressive and who are punishers the entire 12 rounds. They will not give up. They will themselves to finish strong. That's also why I will talk in a future podcast about why Miguel Cotto has a good chance against Floyd Mayweather. He's a relentless punisher for 12 rounds. He gets better as the rounds go, and he's a lot more seasoned and smart than Maidana is. So we'll talk about that in the future. Maidana is going to be facing a very fast and skilled boxer, much like Amir Khan, but this time it's a southpaw in Devin Alexander, who unfortunately, I believe, quit against Timothy Bradley. I think Bradley was just too aggressive, and that head was too strong, his skills were too good, and he was too relentless that Devin wanted a way out. And he could have fought, from my judgment, but it was stopped. And he did not complain at all when it was stopped. Devin's trying to come back from that fight. He's won 1, maybe 2 after that. But I think Devin, even though he's the favorite, I believe, a slight favorite, this is a very, very tough fight for him, especially for somebody who wants to get back to that top prize fighter of the 140 class. He's fighting the guy who is the knockout artist in the junior welterweight class. This is not an easy fight. I think it's more difficult than the Bradley fight. So what Maidana lacks in maybe speed or precise punching or pure technical boxing skills, he makes up with tremendous power shots and aggression and heart. I think for Devin Alexander, he's going to find that this is not too different from the fight with Timothy Bradley. Bradley's a better boxer, but in terms of that aggression and that punishing attitude that he experienced from Timothy Bradley, Maidana's going to bring that same stuff, and I believe his version of it will be even more dangerous to Devin precisely because he's a big puncher. Timothy Bradley is not a big puncher. As Freddie Roach has said, he's got 2 good punches and a really good headbutt. All right, so I look for this fight as one where Devin is going to have to man up and prove that he's a real battler. He will suffer much adversity from the pressure of Maidana. And if he can't show people precisely what they want to see after the letdown against Bradley, namely the guts to stick it out and to turn the tables, then I don't think he's going to be a top dog fighter anymore. It's sad to watch because he's got tremendous boxing skills. Before Devin's loss to Bradley, Floyd Mayweather picked him to be the guy to carry the mantle because he saw the boxing skills of this guy. And it's sad to watch a guy with good boxing skills who possibly doesn't have the heart to overcome tough adversity that you see from big punchers and punishing fighters. I hope Devin proves me wrong, but I think when the going gets rough, and it will soon, and it will often, he will try to find a way out. And unless he can keep people who are picking Devin say that, well, he's too fast and he's got a good jab, he gets in and gets out, And that's true, but that was also true before he fought Bradley. And Bradley beat him with relentless offense. And I think that, as I said earlier, when you add that big punch that Maidana has, that it's not going to be a whole lot different. So I've got the Argentine Marcos Maidana winning this fight by KO, TKO, in the late rounds. That's all for this podcast. Don't forget to watch Derek Chisora and Vitaly Klitschko tomorrow. You can watch that on Epic's High Def. You can watch that fight online, by the way. Create a new account. Sample it. Test it out. Watch the boxing, then cancel it. I don't care. I believe ESPN's Dan Rafael is calling that fight. So check it out, and we'll see you next time. We'll talk about Mayweather versus Cotto. Thanks.